Secondary Succession in Point Pleasant Park following Hurricane Juan by Aidan Moore, Hunter Gaudet, and Jody Connors.
Let's give some background. Succession is how organisms and their environment respond after a large disruption to the habitat. There are two types of succession. Primary succession is when ecosystems must rebuild themselves due to the introduction of a new foundation, and secondary succession is when an ecosystem must rebuild itself after a major destruction. Climax community is when a community can reach a stable equilibrium through the mechanism of succession. Point Pleasant Park is an urban park located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and is known as an Acadian forest. For the Mi'kmaq community, the park is a spiritual gathering space where they would gather yearly for the week after the first full moon of the spring season. On September 29, 2003, Hurricane Juan hit Atlantic Canada. This was a Category 2 storm that destroyed around 70,000 trees in Point Pleasant Park. This phenomenon entered Point Pleasant Park into a state of secondary succession. Past research collected by Maria Turchin showcases the role of succession in Point Pleasant Park from after the hurricane to 2015. This study does not give any further information for years after 2015 and does not address how the park is moving towards climax community. Our study will be investigating succession in Point Pleasant Park since Hurricane Juan using data collected between 2004 and 2023. We want to begin to answer how the overall community has changed, how the dominant species have shifted over time, and how succession has impacted the community metrics. We also want to investigate how these three topics are affected as the park moves towards climax community. Overall, it can be predicted that since the destruction of Hurricane Juan, that the overall dynamics of Point Pleasant Park have shifted due to succession.
Now for the methods. All the sites for this study were within Point Pleasant Park, which is on the western tip of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. 6 20-meter by 20-meter sites were chosen in regions of Point Pleasant Park that sustained the greatest damage to forest structure to provide the best representation of the hurricane's impact. All of the data was collected by hand by introductory ecology students of Dalhousie University. Each year following Hurricane Juan in 2003, all living trees within the 6 sites with a diameter at breast height equal to or greater than 2.5 centimeters were identified and measured to give us information on density and species composition within sites. Measurements were made using a measuring tape following standard diameter at breast height procedure of 4.5 meter breast height. This allowed us to calculate total density, mean diameter at breast height, Shannon diversity, species richness, red maple and red spruce density, and evenness. Now on to the results and discussion. For my section of the results, I'll be looking at how the overall forest community has changed over time following Hurricane Juan. There are 3 null hypotheses for my section of the results. Firstly, there was no significant relationship between total density and time. Secondly, there was no significant relationship between Shannon diversity and time. And lastly, there was no significant relationship between mean diameter at breast height and time. Regression analysis suggested strong positive correlation between time and total density. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and infer that total density increased with time following Hurricane Juan. A second regression analysis suggested strong positive correlation between time and Shannon diversity. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and infer that Shannon diversity increased with time following Hurricane Juan. A third regression analysis suggested significant negative correlation between time and mean diameter at breast height. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and infer that mean diameter at breast height decreased with time following Hurricane Juan. So what caused these changes? By destroying the majority of the forest canopy, Hurricane Juan drastically increased the available territory for new tree growth. Early successional tree species quickly occupied the new open territory and multiplied until the space was filled, leading to an increase in total density. Additionally, with the dominant forest canopy no longer present, access to sun, water, and nutrients was no longer restricted for species that would normally be outcompeted, meaning more species are able to survive and Shannon diversity increases. Furthermore, as new tree species inhabit the open territory, small young trees become increasingly common and a decrease in mean diameter at breast height is expected. So what will the climax community look like? As the forest progresses towards its climax community, I expect the total density and Shannon diversity to decline and the mean diameter at breast height to increase. As Acadian forests mature, competition limits the access of certain species to resources such as water, nutrients, and sunlight. Certain species will not be able to compete with the others, and their populations will shrink. In turn, I expect overall tree density and diversity to decrease. Juvenile trees of many species will struggle to grow in the maturing canopy shadow, while larger trees will continue to grow taller and thicker, increasing mean diameter at breast height.
The second question we are trying to answer is how has the density of the dominant species in Point Pleasant Park in 2004 as well as the dominant species in 2023 in the park changed over time? Red spruce was the dominant species in 2004 and red maple was the dominant species in 2023. The null hypothesis to answer the question states that there is no significant relationship between time and red spruce or red maple density in the park. A regression analysis was performed to explore the relationship between red spruce density in the park and time since the hurricane. There was a significantly strong relationship found between red spruce density and time. This means the null hypothesis is rejected. Another regression analysis was performed to explore the relationship between red maple density and time since Hurricane Juan, and similar data to red spruce was found. This means that the null hypothesis is rejected. Why is this so? Red spruce is shade tolerant, meaning it thrives in environments with a closed canopy. It takes anywhere between 350 to 450 years for red spruce to reach its maximum maturity, which is quite a long growth time. Red spruce was dominating in the park before the hurricane hit. It is possible that red spruce was only dominant in 2004 because of this strong foundation. The open canopy that Hurricane Juan produced would have made it extremely difficult for red spruce to establish new growth, which aligns with our data. Red maple is a shade-intolerant species, meaning that it does not thrive in low light levels. Red maple is known to grow much faster than red spruce. According to Burley, after Hurricane Juan, red maple was found in parts of the park that were destroyed. This is most likely because red maple was able to tolerate the harsh sunlight of the open canopy areas produced by Hurricane Juan. Due to its long growth rate, it can be predicted that red spruce numbers will continue to increase as Point Pleasant Park nears climax community. As the red maple continues to grow, it is possible that the shade that they produce will also allow for further growth of red spruce. The red maple will begin to decline earlier than the red spruce due to their shorter lifespan.
The final topic to discuss is how species richness and pilose evenness has changed over time and how they may react as the forest moves towards its climax community. For species richness, the null hypothesis states that there is no significant correlation between time since Hurricane Juan and the species richness in Point Pleasant Park. Here in Figure 7, we can see that there is significant positive correlation between time and species richness, indicating that the null hypothesis must be rejected. Evidently, there has been an increase in unique species that have been able to survive in Point Pleasant Park after Hurricane Juan had dramatically affected the forested community. One may predict, as the forest reaches its climax community, the species richness will become fixed, as there are only so many native plant species, and the ones able to adapt early generally become more dominant. That being said, there is always the potential of human interference increasing or decreasing species richness. For pilose evenness, the null hypothesis states that there is no significant correlation between time since Hurricane Juan and the species evenness in Point Pleasant Park. For the regression analysis of pilose evenness, a p-value of 0.15 was obtained, indicating that the null hypothesis must be rejected and that there is no significant correlation between time and species evenness. Since the species richness has been steadily increasing since the hurricane, this has affected the efficiency of recording the evenness over time. Each new species introduced is another Point Pleasant Park variable, and comparing the evenness of 3 species compared to 20 is a source of the lack of trend in the data. As the forest moves closer to its climax community, one may predict that pilose evenness may decrease as there will be a high species richness with the potential of a few dominant species. In conclusion, based on the data trends analyzed and the theory of secondary succession after Hurricane Juan, we predict that the Acadian forest in Point Pleasant Park is in mid-stages of succession. It appears that most species are now established in the area and that the introduction of new prospering species may become more and more rare, therefore allowing for the growth of the currently situated populations. 2 factors that may affect the succession of urban parks like Point Pleasant Park are local development in the area, causing disturbance in the environment and introducing pollutants, and the involvement of humans in the park in general. This is not the natural environment of these plant species, and being cared for and preserved by humans may have an effect deflecting from their natural succession. When it comes to caring for the environment, a crucial perspective to keep in play is the native practices of the Mi'kmaq Nation. For the forest to prosper and reach its climax community, these traditions and general knowledge should be incorporated.
We would like to thank Allison Schmidt and Ned Murley, the previous Biology 2060 students who collected our data, our peer reviewers, and Dalhousie University. Here are our references. Thank you for listening.